Oh, we hear in the gospel this morning, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. On this Sunday, this is the end of the church year. This is the Christ the King Sunday. So first of all, let's just name that. For some, that is really tough language. For some, it's like, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, but that whole king stuff feels really hard. And that's okay. It's okay because what we're called to imagine is that sometimes for us, we think about kings in our time, in 2022, and the stories that we like to read, and the history books that we have in our context of kings. And some of them include abuse of power, right? Some of them, it's very old language. Some of them, it's very male-oriented. This morning, we think about Jesus. We celebrate, really, as far as it's interesting with the gospel reading that I'm going to say this, but we celebrate the resurrection and the life and the power and witness of Jesus Christ today before we begin again. We celebrate the vulnerability of Jesus hanging on a cross, just like each or every one of us. Those days when we feel in between, those days when maybe we've lost a marriage or lost a job or lost a child, and a parishioner will pray for a friend of hers that lost a 16-year-old child to suicide and chemical abuse. We know that Jesus hangs on the cross as that young girl hung and knows that she is not alone. And so today we remember that that is why we're here in church. That's why we have a faith. That's why we do this. Jesus, that vulnerable person on the cross saying, it's okay, they don't, gracious God, they don't. It's okay, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We've heard a lot in the last couple of years, regardless of where you fall on any political spectrum, about abuse of power, right? We hear about what does power mean? And I invite you for a minute to think about the people in your life that maybe you respect the most or hold power. I'm not talking about clout, but people that you really care about. People that if they say to you, so did you think that was a good idea? You may say to yourself on the way home, oh, maybe it wasn't. Maybe you think about it, or maybe people that you read about or listen about. People that have power. And my guess is most of those people are people that have gained your respect way down in your belly. Maybe they're not people that you agree with on everything, but maybe you say to yourself, wow, that person is really, I respect who they are on the planet. Power. Remember, we're here, right? Because we're Christians and we're Christ the King Sunday. And what's the gospel? The gospel is Jesus hanging on the cross. And in the next month or so, we're going to imagine that light coming back into our life. We're going to imagine those darkest times of ours. And then we're going to imagine on Christmas Eve, we're going to imagine that light coming back in, that light at the end of the tunnel. In a parishioner said this week, they're going through a really hard time, and they were at a meeting, and then they just started laughing. And they said to me, my God, that was the first time I'd laughed since. That light at the end of the tunnel. We will celebrate the light of Christ. And remember what we call, because we'll sing all these hymns, right? And they'll all go through our head because we've sung them since we were the Prince of Peace. Jesus comes to us as a vulnerable baby. Not on the throne, and not on a horse, and not with all kinds of big stuff. Jesus comes to us as pure love and light and leaves us full of love and light. So if we think about power, think about the king. We worship the king. We used to have a seminary professor who, Charlene, was a renowned professor in African American studies, and she had more chutzpah. And I think of her every time you read. And she used to say, I'm a daughter of the king. You don't talk to me like that. And it's like, my God, I love your chutzpah. And if the chutzpah came from, I am a daughter of the king. Not a king that abused me, not a king that keeps me down, not a king that thinks I stink, but I'm a daughter of the king. Us New England white Caucasian people don't really have that. We weren't really, but you know, I still kind of pull it, but how is it that we think about power as coming from within us? Not something that puts us down or something that we have to put somebody else down. That's what we see now. The power is about, if I put you down, then I'm not okay. Jesus doesn't even do that on the cross. So today we celebrate and think about Christ as King. But maybe that language for you, like for me, is still kind of prickly. Maybe what we wonder today is, who is it that we follow? Why do we really go through this? What does power mean to you? It's an amazing man. I'm sure many of you have read Viktor Frankl, who was an Austrian psychiatrist. He wrote many books, but one of the books that many of us have heard about is Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the concentration camps while they were there. His wife, his mother, his brother, and I believe, at least we know other friends and family were killed. He was not. And upon his release, of course, he spent much of the rest of his life talking to us and preaching and reading and writing about what's really important. He said power is based on love 1,000 times. When power is based on love, it's 1,000 times more effective than if it's based on putting somebody down. Have you ever had somebody in life, whether it's a kid or if you're a teacher maybe? I bet we've all seen it. You see somebody, just yelling at somebody over and over again. I was that kid, which will not surprise some of you, in every classroom that I drove, every teacher I had nuts, Joanne. Absolutely crazy. I was as ADHD as they came, and my father was the head of the school, so they could do nothing with me. But I'll tell you, every time they told me to try harder, it didn't do a darn thing. But I could tell you right now, the teachers that took me aside and said, come on, let's try this. Let's try that. Thanks to them and God, it turned out okay. It wasn't the people that kept going like this. I already thought I was yucky. I already thought I stunk. I already thought I was stupid. It was the people in my life that said to me, you just learn differently. You just don't fit in the box. And you can imagine, I've never really fit in a box. So Viktor Frankl talks to us about how is it that we are able to be people in the world that God needs us to be. And it's not by abusing power. It's by empowering others. It's by making others be able to see that they're going to be okay. Jesus had two thieves, one on each side. They had both done wrong. And he still said, hold on, it's all going to be okay. God loves you. God loves you. So when we think about how it is we can move forward, we are finishing up the Gospel of Luke today. And we will begin in Advent. We will begin the Gospel of Matthew. But I ask us to think about this phrase from Viktor Frankl that I know I need to work a lot on. It says, between the stimulus and response, in other words, between the time I hear you speak and the time I react, between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. Only if you give it. But there is a space. And in that space, it is our power to choose our response. It's in that space. Can we stop? Can we have a moment of grace to choose our response? And in that response lies our growth and our freedom. We hear in the collect this morning, praying for the freedom from sin. We hear so much right now about abuse of power. What is truth? What is not truth? What is right? What is wrong? How is it that we can move back and it not be about politics and it not be about power, but it be about love and commitment? We will hear stories in the next month about what are we called to do? What is Mary's cry is for us to feed the poor and care for the other. She doesn't tell us how to do it or what color it needs to be. She just calls for us to care for the lowly. In that response, in that space, that is where we are called to pray for our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Words from a man who lost everything and yet didn't. So on this Christ the King Sunday, let us not pretend that power is real, because there are two ways to go with power. People like me, I'm like a pacifist. I want to sing Kumbaya, and I want everybody to get along, and I don't want to have to stand up and make it too difficult and look where God put me, right? So let's not pretend power can either be abused or used. Let us use our God-given power for good. That is the example that Jesus came for. That is what he teaches us in word and example. And that is what he died for. So those of us that continue to struggle with this, and we all will, at least I will, those out there that we condemn because we're like, what on earth are they thinking? The people that won't keep us up at night, because what happens if that happens? How is it that we can remember that if Jesus was standing beside them, Jesus would say, forgive them? I'm not capable of that yet, but I can pray with Jesus' words, forgive them, for they know not what they will do. And so on this day, as we celebrate the fact that we do follow Jesus, I still struggle with saying king, but I'm good. I like the idea of being a daughter of the king. But what I do know is I have and will continue to the best of my ability, follow a God that is all about love, that is all about care and compassion, and hoping that we can continue to be the people that spread that, regardless of situation. And I leave you with a saying that I bet many of you have heard from Mahatma Gandhi. Our presiding bishop used it again, he uses it all the time. But it's not his, it's Gandhi's. The day the power of love, whose power it overrules the love of power, the world will know peace. The day the power of love overrules the love of power, the world will know peace. Today we honor and celebrate and give thanks for the life and love and witness of Jesus, who we follow to his death and resurrection, and who we will then await that light coming yet again. It is in our response, in that moment of grace, where we will find growth and freedom.